Welcome to the Stray Pointers podcast, where seemingly ordinary people join us for extraordinary discussions. You're listening to episode 2 of the Stray Pointers podcast. This episode of the Stray Pointers podcast was recorded on August 16th, 2023. I'm your host, Jim Lullis. For links to items referenced in the podcast, please see the show notes for this episode at straypointers.com. Today we're speaking with illustrator and writer Rick Lundeen. Rick, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I noticed on your Amazon authors page biography, the first few sentences run something like this. Daredevil, risk taker, explorer, man of action. Rick Lundeen is none of these. He draws. That's it. Is that really the depth of Rick Lundeen? I personally don't think so.
No, pretty much. I mean, digging ditches, even way too much, way too exotic for me. I've been drawing forever, and that's really the thing I'm most comfortable doing.
So let's talk about that. How long? What are your first memories of the first things that you've drawn? Were you drawn as a preschooler?
Oh yeah. In fact, I do these. Occasionally I do these talks at different schools for kids, elementary school students, and I put together a little slideshow for them. And one of the things I have like an early drawing, which is basically something I used to do when I was around 5 years old. I'd be drawing Batman.
Sure.
But of course, you know how that shorthand, when you draw the really fast scribbly circles, and that's supposed to be the character's legs running.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
For speed. Well, that was about the extent of, but that was me drawing Batman doing that, running at incredible speeds. I used to draw the monkeys.
the Beatles wannabes.
Yeah, and of course they all look pretty much the same, except one had a little hat. That was Mike.
How old were you when you were drawing these things?
About 5 years old.
So I know that there is a connection to comics in here somewhere. When did you start reading comics, and when did they have an influence on your desire to draw?
Well, now I was born in 1962, so I think what led me into comics was when I was 4, 5, 6. It was 66, 67, 68. The Batman TV show premiered, Star Trek premiered, and a lot of Marvel superhero cartoons, including the Fantastic Four, started.
Oh, sure.
And then it was just a few years later that shopping in the grocery store with my grandma, and I spotted comic books, and I go, hey, that's some of the characters that were in these TV shows I like so much, and then that's what got me, seeing these covers, incredible. Neil Adams art, Jack Kirby art, John Buscema, and that was it. That's what started the ball rolling on comics for me.
So were you an art student then throughout your elementary, junior high, high school years?
I usually excelled a bit more than others in school. Took the art classes. Usually ended up with the school system I was in. It was like they sometimes averaged out the grades, and so when I was doing horribly in science and I was doing horribly in math, I was able to, with the English and art, I was able to balance things out for a
Hmm.
really impressively solid C minus. So that worked really well for me. But yeah, I always enjoyed art in school, and never really uh, had any, extra training until afterwards in the college years.
So did you enter contests, any type of competitions, anything like that?
I don't I don't think I ever entered any competitions, but I did do the cover, a couple covers for the yearbook in junior
Okay.
high and high
Hmm.
school, and I look back on them now, and kind of like, oh man, they were really starved for talent back then.
What was your first paying gig?
Um, Gosh, that was probably, I think I probably did a couple personal family freelance projects in the 80s, but the first actual steady paying gig was in 1989, when I was like a full-time freelancer doing storyboards at Ogilvy and Mather, an
Okay.
agency in Chicago here. And that was really when I really started the art career in full motion, and mostly because after basically goofing around for most of the 80s, I had asked my then girlfriend, future wife, to marry me, and I said, well, I better start making some money because I'm pretty committed now.
Sure.
And a good friend of mine, Mike Edsey, he kind of put a connection together and got me an interview at this one place. And it really is, it's who you know.
Sure.
And I was able to get a foothold in there, and then started doing storyboards.
Okay. So before we explore that, I'm curious about your post-high school education. You said you attended, was it the American Academy of Art?
Yes, I attended the academy for the better part of 3 years, 81 through 84. And that was a quite a nice training ground, with some kind of like art boot camp,
Okay.
more or less, because you're doing these in fundamentals was the first year courses, and they ran you through your paces, like doing these intricate perspective designs and color palettes and light sources and all this. And that was never any fun. A lot of all-nighters, but you learn something. And eventually one of the side things you could take was cartooning, and I took that, and that and illustration were the two that I really had the most fun at, because they were basically electives. And I really found that I excelled in cartooning. So
Okay. So before you had made this choice to go off to school, you had obviously graduated through the regular grade school system, through high school.
yeah.
Was there an impasse where you weren't entirely certain that you wanted to be an artist for a career or an illustrator for a career? Were there other
Well,
career paths you considered?
um, I can honestly say no. I never thought about any other career path. It goes back to that opening. I know I can draw, but and I hope to get better. But that's that's where, if there's any money to be made for in my life, it's going to be art.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. So you had talked about your first job. Can you tell me a little bit about what the work was like in the early years? What type of things were you working on?
Well, back then, the main client we had was Sears, so there was a lot of drawing of couches and a lot of just drawing Sears merchandise and the occasional. Well, and we had storyboards as well, where telling little stories frame by frame, uh, mapping out commercials for Sears and that type of thing. And which was nice because that type of sequential storytelling really ties in nicely with comics.
Sure.
And and I learned from the boss at that time, Rudy Klimpert, wonderful old gentleman, a character, just unbelievable. Just a true character, and he was so amazing as an artist. I remember we had to this last second deadline emergency project came in, and we needed to have X amount of frames drawn in a very short amount of time. And Rudy had to draw this gazebo, a couple in a gazebo eating ice cream cones, and in a park. And in under 15 minutes, he constructed this full scene, camera looking through the open doors in the front of this gazebo, and we see the couple inside, and to each side you see all the intricate lattice work of the wood, the white panels and all that stuff. I mean, it was in black and white. He probably could have colored it in an extra 4 seconds too, but and just creating that world that in that one frame, that quickly, that wonderfully, perfectly, and with no reference. There's no time for reference because he had to get it done quick, and it was just magnificent. And it's that type of thing, finding that magic in the one frame, telling that story, getting that message across. That's the type of thing. I learned so much from that man. It was incredible. He was a true gem.
Who else would you say you have learned from?
A couple guys at the studio, at that studio, and then a little bit later on at the next studio I went on to work at down the line. The aforementioned Mike Edzey, I knew him from the Academy. And also Mike Sobey, who's no longer with us, rest in peace. The man was amazing. He could illustrate this steak dinner and just have just the right amount of delicacy to it. The line work, the tone, the color, it would make you hungry.
Is that right?
Oh, and just looking at it, but it was an illustration. But it was and it wasn't photorealistic. It was realistic, but not photorealistic. It had that life of its own that only an illustration can have. I mean, photos are great, but something like that, it just the life of the line just makes everything just incredible. And those two, especially Sobey, I mean, and we were all together in one big studio, and so you're always, when you've got downtime and they're busy, or they got downtime and you're busy, we would go and take a look at what we're doing, what each other's doing, peek over their shoulders and all that stuff, and you learn, you soak in everything. It's really incredible.
Okay, so at what point did you venture out and start publishing your art, your writing independently?
Let's see. The first real, charge into comic books self-publishing was about 1995. And I had this character called Matak, who was this short, squat, like muscle-bound alien, probably 1.5 feet tall. And I decided that I was going to put it through the whole diamond distribution system and have, get a printer, put it out, etc. And back then in 1995, I mean, these days, even before the internet, everybody and their mother was like printing their own comics and all that stuff. But even before that, in 1995, it was somewhat rare that, I mean, you had underground comics, outside of the system, but actually going through the system, there wasn't a ton of people doing their own comics, publishing their own comics through Diamond and the other two distributors at the time. I think Friendly Franks and I can't remember the other one, but yeah, and that so that was kind of an experiment. Didn't go very far because back then, going through a printer, you had to get a minimum of 3,000 copies printed up. And you really need a lot of orders from Diamond to rationalize, going forward from that, because that it wasn't exactly a money-making venture. And so I had another couple issues planned, but there was if nothing else, it was a really good learning experience, learning the timetables of having to get your solicitation materials into Diamond. And then the catalog would come out, orders would be taken. It was a very interesting learning experience, learning the system, and I utilized that for another 6, 7, 8 comics, 9 comics over the next decade.
Okay. So I'm aware of a book you did called 100 Covers. What was the concept behind 100 Covers?
Well, I always, back in the 70s, 80s, I always used to love covers that told a story, that that gave you a pretty good idea of what the stakes are in a book. I mean, what's going to happen. I mean, there's not giving any spoilers away, of course, but it really, it made you want to pick up that book. And in later years, I can, the 2000s, the aughts, whatever, you'd have all these comics out there. You could go through, there was a time there would be like 30, 40 months of the latest issue of Spider-Man where it was just him web slinging through New York. Yep. And you had no idea what's going on in the comic, who the villain is, anything. I would think that would be really hard to keep track of what's going on. And so I decided to do a collection of the first 100 covers of a superhero team called the Battalion. And you would see their adventures, experience their adventures only through the covers of what would have been the first 100 issues of their run. And if it was sometimes I got to play with, if it's a 2-part story or a 3-part story, well, you get your major beats worked into the covers. And with you could have like a special blurb on top that gives a little bit of something away. Then, of course, the title, and then another blurb, throw a little Stan Lee hyperbole in the corner, and give a good idea of what the threat is and the possible, maybe even a possible solution. But there's a shorthand with comic fans where the good guy is usually going to win. So really, you just have to give a partial setup and give the threat, and you kind of know that they're going to win. So their imagination does quite a bit of the work as well. And you could have a little bit of fun with a multi-part story. I did I did an 8-part alien invasion story that I was able to knock out just in a weekend, because it was the oddest thing too, because I was listening to this bizarre music, a lot of just crazy alien noises from a mutual friend of ours, Eric San Juan. One of his mood altering music fiascos, and it hit just the right note, and I just tore through all 8 covers in a weekend, and it just worked like a gem. Sometimes when you get in a groove, it just, it's crazy. And the other nice thing about the battalion is that if I was going to do 100 covers, I wanted to go with a team, because different members could be reacting in a certain order to give you almost act as subsequent frames on a page. There's one I did with a bunch of all the team members were caught on these stasis tubes, and the first member was fine. The second one was being affected by something. The third one was like glowing. The fourth one was being reduced in some way. Eventually, there's like this little energy ball coming out on a conveyor belt, so you could see the step by step of what's happening, which you could do with a team, and it's harder to do with a single hero. So I went with the whole team concept, and it worked out pretty well.
So did you make up these as you went along, or was there an overarching plan that you had for the 100 different pieces?
I think there were a couple themes that I threw in the first volume. I did 3 volumes all total. The first volume, I sprinkled in amongst the 100 a Father's Day theme, where throughout the 100 covers, we saw each of like the 7 key members reacting with their fathers in some fashion. One was getting the news from his father, who's a doctor, that he was dying of radiation poisoning. One was visiting her father in prison. So each one a different theme, but it was a Father's Day Part 2 could have been like 17, 18 issues after Father's Day Part 1, because it was loosely based. And also I did a whole set of origins where I had like one guy, I had just a bunch of these Polaroid pictures thrown down on a desk, which showed like different shots, showed how this one character came to be, and things like that. And I eventually put up a little mock board to make sure that I spread out everything in a certain way, everything balanced itself out, and yeah, so that had more pre-planning on not only filling those 100 covers, but coming up with interesting ways to fill them up with different stories, because we had several multi-part stories, but a whole bunch of like single issues. But it was really a matter of a picture says 1,000 words, and I went with that, or tried to go with that anyway.
So what was your goal on that project? Were you trying to draw attention to you, your skills, that sort of thing? Was it a labor of love that you just wanted to get out there?
Well, it was I thought it was an interesting idea, and it's certain. I mean, with comics, almost everything's been done at this point, but that was something that had not been done, and so I felt good about that. Any attention I got from it, and it got a lot of critical praise, not a lot of commercial success, but those that read it really enjoyed it and the concept. And if there's any attention, I'll gladly take any attention coming my way, but I'm certainly not expecting it right off the bat, but
Okay. Any big name reviewers? You said you got some accolades there. Were there um
well, I know Jim Valentino, one of the Image founders, uh, he had seen it, and he was very, very complimentary about it. It was not something that they could do at the
mhm.
time, but he really loved the idea. And Gary Calabano, who was one of the big comic retailers back in the day, he was really loving it. I mean, I don't. There may have been a couple small time reviewers that saw it and liked it, but never really had a ton of attention in the press. I tried to promote it as much as I could, but once again, I'm not even that much of a promoter. I draw. That's all I do is draw.
Okay, well let's talk about another one of your creations. Let's talk about the Swede.
Mm.
So what is the genesis of that character?
Well, as
Well,
I
well, first of all, maybe you could give us the 20 words or less description of the Swede for someone who's never heard of him.
uh, the Swede is an assassin that likes to work with his hands, and he doesn't say much. And we just see his project after project after project.
Okay. Okay. So now the genesis of that character.
Um, I can't remember if I wanted to do something vaguely reminiscent of what Darwin Cook did, but or if the Swede as a character came first. But I think it was just a blending of the two, because I picture the Swede, who's usually in a suit and tie, and he's very stoic. He never gets much emotion playing across that craggy face of his. Slightly based on Lee Marvin, but not too much. But again, that's the whole Darwin Cook thing. I decided to go with an art style which was basically uh, you know black and white and one color, percentages of one color, to give it a certain look. And I wanted to and this was a case where, since he's an assassin, he's got his missions, he goes on his assignments, um, and he doesn't say much, and he doesn't need to say much. He tries to be quick, quiet, efficient, and it allowed me to further explore as much visual storytelling as I could. I really enjoy getting the message across visually, trying to tell as much of the story as humanly possible visually, so there's not much dialogue, if any, needed. And for quite a bit of the time in all three volumes of the series, I try to limit it as much as possible. And there's a couple scenes where he gets his assignment from the operator, who's the guy who gives him the info. But for the most part, I just try to keep it nice and simple, and put as much power as I can into it.
Tell me a little bit about Super Unicorn Mega Chop.
That I must have been. Oh well, I was on vacation one year, and I decided to do something that was like touching on the manga
Mhm.
just a little bit. There's so much manga out there, just like anime, and there's so many different levels, so many different styles, and I don't like the cutesy precious section. I like more of the hard edged stuff. And I decided, frankly, I'm not sure how this came together in my head, but this guy, he in times of emergency, he grows this giant mechanical organic hand, but just one of them, and he transforms into this. His skin gets all chalky white, and this unicorn horn just like basically drills out of his forehead. I guess I was going for as much visceral action as I could, much like a lot of the manga stuff, and it allowed me to go with a much thinner line, drawing all this stuff, and his whole thing is it's and as in the one shot issue that I did, I explore in the first couple of pages, why he's super. Why he's referred to as a unicorn, why he's referred to as mega when he starts growing to the size of a kaiju, and then chop, which I'll let people read the book to see why I added that. But put all that together, and it was I thought it was an interesting twist on some of the manga concepts and kaiju and all that. And since there's gotta be zillions of manga comics that have come out over the decades, I mean zillions, who knows, someone may have done the little twist I did before. There's a certain twist in the comic having to do with kaiju and our main character. So I'm not sure, but if they have done this before, no one said anything. So I feel good. I feel clear.
Okay, so you had a project that was aimed more toward the children's market that was called, and help me if I mispronounce this here, called Mickey and Madge. Is that right, or is it Mickey and Madge?
It is Mickey and Madge.
Okay.
Short for Majestic.
Majestic. Okay.
Yeah. And a friend of mine, Jim Pippick, he made some kind of comment about how they don't have anything for any comics for kids anymore, and one thing led to another, and I started thinking about, instead of the old A Boy and His Dog, I figured, how about A Boy and His Ancient Magic Carpet with an Attitude. I picture, if it was ever animated, I picture Mel Brooks doing the voice. Excuse me, Albert Brooks. I picture Albert Brooks doing the voice of Madge. And that's, so... And it was just like a fun thing for kids, and a goofy little kid, Michael James Hawthorne, and who really spends. He's only 7 years old, but he's already spending, all day on his phone or gaming, whatever, and his mom comes in one morning and, because he did something wrong and he's got a timeout, so he couldn't do any electronics. So of course, an hour in, he's just bored silly. He hates the world. And mom comes in and she's dug out this old carpet from the attic, dusty old carpet, but he's got a hardwood floor in his bedroom. And she says, well, maybe go outside and play. But if you're not going to go outside and play, here, I brought this in and put it, because, put it on the cold hardwood floor, a nice cushy little, carpet, 3x5 or whatever it is. And she unrolls it on the floor. He eventually, out of boredom, just goes down, on top of it, cuddles up on it, falls asleep, and he wakes up about 5,000 feet in the air because the carpet happens to be alive and happens to be just like going out and amongst the clouds. And from there, they go on their adventures. He can go, Majestic is part of the Tapestry, which is this alliance, alliance of magic carpets created by the Weaver thousands of years ago. And every carpet must have its writer. And Majestic, who basically just wants to get out of the attic, he's we're going to grab this kid and he's going to be my writer. And eventually they get into all sorts of adventure and all sorts of trouble. And of course, the rest of the Tapestry is aghast because he's got this 7-year-old kid as a writer going through all time and or space and or dimensions, because Majestic can basically go anywhere. So kind of like Doctor Who meets Calvin and Hobbes with a sprinkling of Harry Potter.
Okay, so you've also had some prose novels that you've put out with some illustration. You've written, or maybe it's more appropriate that they're novellas. They're sort of short novels, but you wrote one called "Where Have All the Heroes Gone" and another called "Merlin and the Nuclear Engine." What drove you to gear yourself more toward the writing side and not as much the art?
With Merlin and the Nuclear Engine, I don't really, although I'm still working my way into actually being a writer. I can't really consider myself that yet, but I kind of baby steps in a way. I mean, I've written little bits here and there, all over the place, but I decided to take a little adventure and do a very short prose book with Merlin and the Nuclear Engine. And it's a very quick little story, but I wanted to see, because since I enjoy creating, telling a story visually so much, it got to the point where, okay, well, I felt I was pretty successful at doing that, but let's see how I am telling a story just by word. And the Merlin and the Nuclear Engine was the first step. I could have basically, it would have been like a 12 page book if I had just done, it was just prose. But I figured, well, in this particular case, let me just do a few spot illustrations to like not only beef it up, but help things, the overall look and feel. And then after that, I said, okay, I had this other idea for a story, and this is what would become Where Have All the Heroes Gone. And I'd come to a crossroads because I started to jot down things, because sometimes an idea could percolate in my head for years as I just hone it, refine it, tweak it, etc. But here I had already done some thumbnails of a couple pages if I were to lay it out as a comic. And I could have done it as a comic, but then I go, well, you know what, here, take the training wheels off and see if you can do absolutely no visuals whatsoever and try to write an actual book. And reworking it chapter by chapter. I have no idea how many drafts I went through, because I just kept going back and back and back and back, which you do. But in the end, I was as a first attempt, I felt that I conveyed the visuals okay. I thought that I got the message across. I wanted to paint that picture with words, and it was very important to me. So and that was for me the pinnacle of the writing exercise to get that done. And I'll have to go back and reread it and see just how because I'd reread it as I rewrote it so many times. At some point, I'll have to go back, put some distance, go back and reread it again, and just see if I'm actually as interested in it as as I should be or hope to be. But
Okay. You have mentioned a number of folks, characters, artists. Can we talk a little bit about fandom and your favorite types of media and characters and that sort of thing? I assume that you were, because of your age and what you've described earlier, that the explosion of Marvel Comics in the late 60s did not go, under your radar. You were probably as much or more of a Marvel zombie than I was.
well, back then, around 1970, I think maybe 71, was when I first came upon these comics, and I didn't know, everybody back then was like either a Marvel zombie or a DC devotee, as it were. And it was like sides were clearly drawn. Well, I was just like 7 or 8 or something. I didn't know I was supposed to choose a side, like so many did, because there was a lot of trash talking going on between
Sure.
both sides, as it is with kids and all that stuff. And I didn't know, so I didn't know any better. So the first books I actually picked up were I think a Treasury edition of Batman, where several stories where he went up against Ra's al Ghul, drawn by Neil Adams, and written by Denny O'Neil. And right alongside that, I'd picked up Fantastic Four 112, the Hulk versus the Thing, for my money, the greatest all-time battle issue ever in the history of comics, with art by John Buscema and Joe Sinnott. And talk about two unbelievably different worlds. I mean, and at the same time as I was seeing that, the present day Fantastic Four with Buscema, they also had Marvel's Greatest Comics reprints of the FF, done by Jack Kirby, Stanley and Jack Kirby. And so I was being deluged by some of the greatest talent ever in the history of comics. And that was just like, day one. So of course I was all in immediedely. And I just went from there. I was getting a lot of Batman stuff, a lot of Fantastic Four, and then I spread out from there: Justice League, Avengers, and just through the 70s, and and I, to this day, it's like I've always been Mr. Mainstream. It's always been Marvel and DC, pretty much equally across the board. And never got into the independent stuff that much, because it really depends on what you're brought up on. Like so many things.
So who's your favorite character then? Who's your favorite superhero?
Well, it would kind of be a tie between the Thing and Batman, because I don't know. Why? I'm not sure. I'm sure there's a whole psychological thing that kids go through where they imprint on certain characters tied into their life experience or something like that. Or it just might be that, boy, Batman looks cool. Could be that, or the Thing is just this lovable, rocky monster who smashes things. I mean, and he's funny. He's got a great sense of humor, and so in fact, I in a way he kind of reminded me of my grandfather. So it's things like that. But I've been a huge fan of both the Thing with the Fantastic Four and Batman, and by extension, some of the Bat family. So,
Okay, you're also a big fan of Doctor Who, is that right?
yes, I
Bigger fan of Doctor Who than the comics characters, or is it pretty much an even match?
am. Well, with Doctor Who, I mean, the sheer concept of it is just so amazing, and the conceit of when the lead actor in the role wants to leave the role or has to, the character is able to regenerate into a new body. How can you lose there? That is, I mean, when I first found the show, I was 18. It was 1980, and I had no clue about this whole regeneration thing. And I went to this little side room at a comic convention that had Doctor Who stuff, and the guy holds up this portrait someone drew of like these four faces, and I go, well, I recognize the Doctor there, Tom Baker with the curly hair. Who are these other three guys? And then he explained to me about who played the Doctor before him, regeneration. Oh, I'm tingling now just even thinking about this, because once again I was all in. It was just like 10 years earlier with the comics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was just I'm a bit of an extremist, because boy, I just go all in like crazy in these things. But yeah, it's just such an amazing, strong, sky's the limit concept. You can go anywhere, time and space, and plus it was it was live action. It was I have to say Doctor Who even tops the comic characters, because back then it's just like they were 2D. Doctor Who was full on live action, so he's the tops.
Sure. So maybe we'll compare a few notes then here. My first Doctor was John Pertwee, so I had seen those episodes on PBS in the late 70s. So we're coming up on about the time where he regenerates. So I'm assuming Tom Baker was your first Doctor. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so who was your favorite Doctor?
I'd probably have to stick with Tom Baker. I mean, we've got so many doctors out there in history, but yeah, Tom Baker. I mean, there is something to be said for your first Doctor, but at the same time, he could command a room like nobody's business. The voice alone was just, I mean, those first four Doctors, Hartnell, Troughton, Pertwee, and Baker, they were all so distinctive, had such flair, I mean, really, that's the gold standard, those first four. I mean, everything else basically sprung from them, I feel. And the show was incredibly popular back in the 70s because of Pertwee and Baker. I mean, it being in color and all that stuff. But yeah, it's kind of like the first three were like these very specific archetypes, these three very different Doctors. And then Baker was almost like a combination of all of those and then some for me. And that was hard to beat Tom Baker when it comes to it. Although I must admit, of the new era, I do like I think Peter Capaldi is maybe my favorite of the
Sure.
of the new
Yeah, that was a great one.
era.
And My favorites were I'd probably join you in saying Tom Baker was probably my favorite Doctor. John Pertwee probably comes in a very close second, and I don't know if it's just because those were the first couple. I've gone back and I've seen some biographies on the different doctors, and I missed quite a run uh, uh, of the doctors until we got into the kind of the more modern era of doctors. And my interest has been piqued now on the Sylvester McCoy version of the character. So I think I'm going to try to go back. I think there's a collection of those that are available via BritBox or a streaming service like that I'm going to have to go back and revisit because it sounds like Sylvester McCoy was also a very interesting doctor, seemingly along the lines of a Tom Baker type, a little bit of um, a fool, court jester sort, but
Mhm.
then you'd see him just turn dead cold, apparently, in some of these stories. So I'm kind of anxious to see this.
Yeah, they during the 80s they had some upsets and they had some troubled times, but with McCoy, I'd recommend probably his final season, his third and final season, season 26, because the new script editor kind of like got his stuff together because he was a very fresh-faced young kid when he came in. And by that third season, I think they had a really nice rhythm going. But sadly, even though they probably would have done one more season with McCoy, that's when the show got canceled. But yeah.
So, what was your favorite Doctor Who story arc?
Well, it's strange because they had back then in the 70s they always did 4-part adventures, 6-part adventures, sometimes 8. There was even a 10 and there a 12, etc. But as a whole, as a string of adventures all put together, I'd actually have to say, as one big era, a chunk, would be Tom Baker's first 3 seasons under producer Philip Hinchcliffe and Robert Holmes, the script editor. It's been referred to as the golden age of Doctor Who, and I've got to agree. There was no exploiting like tons of old enemies. There was a couple appearances, but it was they took the gothic horror approach, and that whole run of those three seasons with Tom Baker's Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith, played by Elizabeth Sladen. That whole run is just the perfect. I mean, and again, I came in the middle back in 1980. The first thing I saw was Brain of Morbius, which was smack dab in the middle of that golden age, and yeah, it was that was fantastic, and that's probably my favorite era of classic Who. But they've got there's so much good stuff amongst those first 4 Doctors. The Pertwee's first season was just so powerful. I mean, and it was before they got into the whole too deep into the unit family aspect. The second season with Hartnell, that they've got that on collection now and Blu-ray, just very strong. Same with the first season. So many powerful elements in those early years, and yet also with Peter Capaldi, the series 9, what was it called? Heaven Sent and Hell Bent, the 2-part finale of season 9. Just amazing stuff. Peter Capaldi putting on a one-man show. but it's too hard to come up with narrow it down. And in these next 17 hours, I'll tell you more about the favorite stories of my Doctor. Because
So
yeah,
you've done some comics work with Doctor Who. You've drawn some Doctor Who comics. Are these anything you've published, or are these just art samples you've put together?
no, there's really I did excuse me. I did I did one short story, part 3 of something called The Time Leech, for this UK magazine, which I don't even know if it ever saw print, because I think the magazine got canceled. But the one that really was a labor of love was I adapted William Hartnell from the William Hartnell era, the Dalek Master Plan, the 12-part adventure. I adapted that into comic form in honor of the 50th anniversary of the show. And of course, all that's licensed material. So what I had to do was I with the help of Christian Cawley, a guy who used to run Castorberus, an old Doctor Who website, he was able to line up a printer, and we printed up a couple hundred copies of this graphic novel. It was 168 pages, full color, and any profit, any proceeds went to the Children in Need charity, which got us off the hook for any copyright stuff. And but for me, it was just a labor of love, because the story was so wonderful. It was like the biggest thing in Doctor Who back then. Really, with the Mission to the Unknown prelude a month earlier, it was a 13-part episode, 13 episode epic. And I'm not sure. Yes, it was a labor of love. It was also insane. I don't know why I did it, but I couldn't help myself but do it. And it afforded me the opportunity to just blow the budget out the window on visuals, which they never had that luxury back in the day. They were operating on a shoestring budget, so they had this council of an alien alliance with all these different aliens, and I was able to go nuts with just taking what they did and actually like enhancing it to make them far more alien and all that. Mavic Chen, the guardian of the solar system, he was a larger than life character. And as wonderful a job as Kevin Stoney, the actor who portrayed him, did with the comic, I was able to make him that much, more buff, bulkier, bigger than life. And when you have unlimited camera angles and you could spare no expense, you've got the greatest FX budget ever because it's a comic, and there's so many things you could do. The Time Destructor, it was just a lot of fun. It was about 16 to 18 months of my life to do this thing on the side, aside from work. And it was just a very I was very proud of it.
Great. So what is next for Rick Lundeen? What's on the horizon?
I'm on the work side, going through a lull right now, so I'm reinstituting contacting schools and doing some of the talks with kids, how to create a universe with your pencil, the importance of the line, what you can do with it, and that's always fun, because you can he could talk. I could, I do a little multimedia thing. I could sketch in front of him and all that, and up on the screen, and it's fun. And usually at the end, there's one or two kids that actually come up and thank me, like, they really enjoyed it, which, that is worth it right there. But that's on that side. And, whenever the actual regular storyboard freelance work comes in, it comes in. Again, it's freelance, so I have no idea when. And on the comic side, I'm working on a 4-issue miniseries called The Bombardier. And that is actually something that I'm spinning off of a 8-part cover series in the first 100 covers. I kind of covered the broad strokes of this, but I kind of like changed some things, and so now I'm telling the story of the Bombardier and Emperor Zoe, his arch nemesis, and which their not rivalry, but their enemy. They became enemies at the end of World War II, and they're just two walking nuclear powerhouses now. And so it's telling their story and ending their story at the same time at the end of the 4th issue. So and I've taken my time just doing that. I've got the first issue done, working on issue 2 now. So that's what's going to be keeping me busy for a while, I think.
Very good. Well, hey, thank you for joining us tonight. I really appreciate your time. I really love the stories. It was great having you here.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. It was fun.
Thank you.
All right.
Many thanks to Rick. I hope you all enjoyed the episode. Let's do this again soon. Take care.